Welcome to the Uncensored Society podcast, where guests share their insights, experiences, and tactics to help you accelerate your business. So building, scaling, and monetizing your business is made easier. And now, your host, Kay Suthar.
Guys, I have an amazing speaker for us this week. Our next speaker is a leading social impact influencer. She has 4 law degrees from the top schools around the world, from the universities of London and Cambridge, and 2 from Stanford Law School. She's received 3 highly prestigious international academic awards, was a Cambridge Commonwealth Scholar, a Fulbright Fellow, and Lieberman Fellow. She now is a tenured law professor in Mississippi and specializes in intellectual property law. She's here today to share with us how to integrate a social impact mission into your business model for business growth and increased profitability and sales. Please welcome Alina Boyte, the founder and CEO of the Change Maker Institute. Oh my goodness, Alina, thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you, Kay. It's such a pleasure to be here today.
Now, we did have a short conversation prior to this, and you were telling me about, how businesses, they have a mission, right? You have a mission to serve the world, but then integrating that into, working alongside possible charities and to help other charities externally outside of your business is something that's really important. And the reason why I brought you onto this podcast was because I was having those exact same thoughts regards to uncensored society, right? And I was like, well, if I'm thinking about that and you're talking about it, there is clearly a need to know how to do this and also why it's so important when it comes to business growth, right? So I'm looking forward to all the golden nuggets that you're going to be sharing with all of us and teaching us more about that. But before we get into the whole nitty-gritty, first of all, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you did before stepping into this business that you've now built.
Yeah, Kate, thanks so much for that question. So as you mentioned earlier, I still am a law professor, so I never really left. So I don't have like a previous job. I still am a tenured law professor in Mississippi College in the US.
Okay.
But I guess I started the business together in conjunction with being a law professor. And I guess to the question about why did I start the business, you met my daughter. Yeah. She really is the inspiration behind the Changemaker Institute because, to cut a really long story short, I was inspired by a visiting priest who came to the church that we regularly attend. And my daughter at that time was maybe about 2.5, 3. And he talked about how poor some parts of the world is and how some places in Africa, women who stayed home while the men worked in the fields had to choose between who to feed because they didn't have enough food.
Oh, wow.
And many times the men would take priority because they were the ones who were bringing in, who would work in the field and be able to sell the produce and then bring money back. So they took priority. And sometimes the mother would have to say to the child that today is not your turn to eat. Wow. And when the priest said that, and he said there has to be a world where a mother never has to say to a child that today is not your turn to eat. And my daughter was right there next to me in the pew. And I started crying. I just started crying. And a lot of things came together around that time because my daughter was growing up and, we were talking about wanting to bring her out to San Francisco, the Pacific, to see the whales. Mm-hmm. And we just never had the time. We still haven't done that. And I keep thinking, well, I want the whales to still be there when we eventually do have the time to go and see them when she grows up. So there were a lot of things that came together that I was conscious before, but it wasn't an urgency until I had my daughter. So she's the inspiration behind what we're trying to do with the Changemaker Institute.
Amazing, amazing. And so I've got to ask you, so, you never left law, you're doing law, and I know that is, an industry that's very go, 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 high demanding. How do you balance the two?
That's an awesome question. That is a really good question. With law, a lot of lawyers end up burnt out because of you're right. It's a constant movement forward, and not only do you have paperwork to do and in court filing, you have to deal with clients. And when people come to lawyers, they come with problems, right? So you never go to a lawyer for wellness, right? You go to a lawyer because you have a problem. And so a lot of lawyers end up burnt out. And as a law professor, I was very attuned to that. I was very, very conscious of that. And the Changemaker Institute, a lot of what we're trying to do there as well is create a mindset shift. Okay. Where and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about this later, but it's really focusing on what you're really good at. What's your core strengths, and focusing on that and creating impact from that space. And many of us end up in law because our fathers were lawyers, or our mothers expected us to be lawyers, right? Or we have that type A personality where there's this natural need to achieve. And sometimes our real purpose takes the back seat while we do all that.
That's true. That's very true. Okay. And so I heard, Alina, that you have this very unique ability, and you're actually known to see how businesses can be socially and environmentally impactful. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So all businesses, Kay, to be honest, every single business has an impact.
Yes.
And sometimes we don't know that.
Yes.
And what's more problematic is sometimes the impact is negative. And we still don't know that, right?
Right.
But the what we're trying to do is help businesses see the positive impact they can potentially have. And so the way we do that is getting them. We talked a little bit about purpose just now. And at the core of every business is an individual.
Yes.
Right. Regardless of what we teach in law, it's a separate legal entity. A business is a separate legal entity, but at the very core are people. And that core group of people will usually have a collective, right? If it's a single entrepreneur, it's you and what your purpose is. But if it's a bunch of you working together at the core, you will have collective experiences and collective knowledge and expertise that forms the core of what you're really, really good at.
Right.
Usually your purpose or that core expertise is what your impact is going to be in the world.
Okay, I see. Now that makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about, you mentioned to me previously before this episode about, picking charities that work well with your business and how that is a positive for your business and growth. So why should people do this? And also, how do you then decide which charity you want to be working with?
Yeah, so the very first question, Kay, why should people do this? Why would you want to work with a charity? And the reason is we all have limited resources. Mm-hmm. So whether that limit in resource is in terms of the potential outreach we can have, right, or the potential expertise that we have, or the potential know-how that we are limited in our ability to make an impact one way or another. Sometimes we don't have the money. Sometimes we don't have the right connections, right? Sometimes we don't have we're not able to reach out to the right stakeholders, right? And when we talked about purpose, once you've identified your purpose, you want to see who's aligned with you.
Okay.
Right? Who is aligned with you in furthering that purpose. So, for example, at the Changemaker Institute, our core expertise, and because of my background in intellectual property and the people that that are within my team, our core expertise is really on businesses and innovation and creativity, right? And making an impact by teaching people how to be more innovative, how to be more creative, and how to create impact. But there's only so far we can reach. We have to partner with people who are connected to that space so that we can spread our message, right? Like, for example, coming on this podcast is a form of partnership because I'm getting my message out. I would not be able to reach people if not for you.
Right.
So let's just say you and let's replace you with a nonprofit organization or a charity, right? So you would partner with an organization. So let's just say in your case, if your focus is on marketing and teaching people a very specific way to do marketing to create impact, right? You want to partner with organizations and nonprofits and charity that actually have the people, right, or have the resources that you actually lack.
Okay.
For the audience.
All right.
Right.
And so where would, if people are thinking about doing this, how would you even begin and start to look at the different, charities out there?
Yeah. So you want to, I guess I would have to take you several steps back to really know, to get you to really think about, in your audience, to think about really what your purpose is. Once you're really clear on that, then we know which organization to work with.
Okay. All right, I see. And so, Alina, you mentioned, you work in law, right? And you've gone through many different stages, qualifications, studies. I know because I was a law student myself, and there's a lot of different steps that you have to take, right? And keeping up with the different laws that come out as well. So we know that you're a professional, you're an expert when it comes to law. But what actually qualifies you as an expert when it comes to, aligning yourself with a nonprofit or charities and building a business on that side of things?
That's a really good question, Kay. So right, you're right. My expertise, really, my core training and if you want to call it, what I do on a day-to-day basis, it's intellectual property law. So I teach law, and I spend a lot of time thinking about intellectual property.
Right.
But in terms of social impact and making an impact, that stems from what I understand about society and how we progress as a society as a result of what I've studied as a student.
Okay. All right. So it's personal experience and the things that you've seen, heard, and been around.
Yes, and I draw from. So a lot of the things that we didn't talk about this earlier, we talked before, but a lot of the things that we teach in the Changemaker Institute is really to understand how people think and how people,
right,
and how making an impact, the impact that you can make can be potentially a lot more sustainable if we understand how people think. And if we can change norms about people's biases, if we can change norms that surround people's heuristics, a shortcut way of thinking, then we change something very fundamental, right? So there's no point talking about diversity or equity if the biases are still there, right?
Okay. And so we need to get rid of the biases that we've developed through negative experiences in order to then kind of evolve, grow, and progress in a positive way and to move forward. All right. So that must be a hard thing to do, right? Especially if you've been carrying these biases for so many years. How do you remove that?
So that happens on two levels. One is checking your own biases. And I think that's the easy thing, being aware, right? So being aware, okay, how am I looking at the world that could potentially marginalize someone else, right? And it's being conscious and being proactive in the way you look at things. And I think that's the easy part. The more difficult part is pointing out other people's biases that is actually causing the inequity, changing the norms around other people's biases.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's not enough, I think, in my view, it's not enough to have affirmative action or having more people of color in an organization when there are systems in the organization that do not empower them.
Ah,
And when
okay.
we talk about social impact, one of the things that we teach in the Changemaker Institute is to look at the very systems that are actually causing the problem that you're trying to solve.
I see. So, Alina, I wonder if you could teach a principle to our audience today, right now, that they can relate to and implement in their business straight away. Are you able to do that for us today?
Yeah, for sure. Let me see. A really easy principle to implement if you want to create social impact is to design solutions that you want to introduce that can do three things. Number one, if you're using technology or any kind of supporting infrastructure, make sure that technology or infrastructure is feasible, that it works, right? And that people can actually use it. Number two, make sure that whatever solution that you're providing is economically feasible. Economically viable. So technologically feasible, economically viable. In other words, someone is willing to pay for it and you can make money from the solution that you're providing because you have to sustain your social impact.
Yeah.
So technically feasible, it must work. Number two, it has to be economically viable. People have to pay for it. It has to be a market.
Right.
And number three, it has to be user desirable. That means people actually want it.
I see.
So many times when we design things and we put things out there hoping to create an impact, one of those things are missing. Right. Maybe the technology doesn't work, right? So you need to make sure the technology works. Or maybe it's something that is so great, technology is perfect, but nobody wants to pay for it. It's not something that people want.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you there because I feel like what a lot of people do when they're first starting out, they have an idea. Oh my God, I've got this wonderful idea. I'm going to start a business on this. But they don't actually do the research and see if it's something that the market wants. Is it going to sell, right? And we get stuck in our own heads, coming up with all these different ideas, creating it, spending time and money creating it, and not actually looking at, but what are the markets saying to us, right?
Exactly.
And so that is most important thing to do. And I totally agree with those 3 steps. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I wonder, Alina, do you have a couple of success stories that you can share with us today?
Yeah, so I guess to follow up on the 3 things that I was talking about: user desirability, technological feasibility, and market viability, economic viability. One of the success stories we've had is we ran a recent design thinking workshop, 7 weeks, on each one of the design thinking steps to actually address those 3 things. Ooh. So to get the people who were actually, and it was free, we ran it free. It was a community building event. Anyone could attend. We promoted it on LinkedIn, and we've had between, sometimes there were 5, but sometimes there were 25 people who would show up, and we would give them templates to get them thinking about those 3 things, right? How do we design a solution in a way that actually addresses those 3 things? And for the design thinking process, it's a 7-step process. Okay. But you start by really understanding your problem, by conceptualizing it, and then you start testing it, and you prototype, you build a prototype, and then you put the prototype back out in the market, and you gather information, and then you reflect, and then you go through the entire process all over again, right? To keep reiterating the solution so that those 3 things, 3 components are met. So that's one example. Another example, I know you're really supportive of female entrepreneurs. Right. So one of our clients is and we're still working with her, and her goal is really to raise impact investment.
Okay.
But we're working on her with the impact that she's making in terms of designing furniture for pet that is sustainable and part of the restorative economy, where she's very careful about the material that she uses to actually put the furniture together, making sure that it complies with environmental standards. So we're helping her with that impact, so that when she eventually comes to.
Sorry. Did you say she's creating furniture for pets?
Yes.
Okay, so you got to tell us a little bit more about that, because I'm in my head I'm thinking, of a sofa for a dog, right, or a chair for a dog. What kind of furniture are you talking about here?
Yeah, so maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been. It's probably, let me rephrase that. It probably is furniture for humans with a pet crate embedded in it. So it's like a sofa it may be a sofa with a table or a coffee table that underneath it is a self-contained, comfortable pet crate that keeps a pet calm.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it isn't really pet furniture, but it's furniture for people that allows them to contain their pets in the home comfortably.
Awesome. Okay, so it's a very different, I guess, very different concepts and different businesses and different ways on how you can really impact your business, and making sure you're kind of keeping to the environment and being safe, and just kind of making sure that you're doing the right thing for the planet. So that's really interesting, because both the two things that you're doing, right, law and creating an impact, are two very different things, right? But you have figured out how to bring them together and how to make it work, because there is a need for both. So that's awesome. Now, I know at this stage, Alina, people are thinking, oh my God, how do I learn more about what Alina's doing, and how do I contact her? So where can they go to connect with you?
The best place to start is our website, so www.changemakerinstitute.org. And if this is a topic that really interests you or your audience, I really encourage you to get on our social impact readiness assessment. So there is a 10-question assessment that will help you assess where you are in terms of your readiness to create impact. That's one. It's right on our website. You won't miss it. Once you get there, you'll see it.
Brilliant.
But if you scroll down our webpage, there's also a place to sign up for our newsletter, and that's the second best way to keep in touch with us, because we send weekly newsletters out about what's happening in the social impact space and what's happening with the Changemaker Institute. And if there's any way I can support your audience, I'm happy to help as well. So you can also email me at Alina, ALINA, at changemakerinstitute.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alina. And guys, don't forget, if you've missed any of those links or you didn't quite catch them, they are in the show notes below. So make sure you scroll down and connect with Alina. I encourage you to do so, because she's doing great things and she'll be the best person to advise you and get you on the right track. Alina, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. So many golden nuggets. And I'm sure there's going to be so many of us be able to take so much of that information away with us and start implementing it in our businesses. So thank you.
Absolutely, Kate. Thanks for having me. It's been a fun conversation.
Most definitely. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Society podcast at www.uncensoredsocietypodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can get this and every other episode that's coming out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.